welcome everybody. Most of you know I'm Dave Bonowitz, Executive Director of Death Penalty Action, part of the Abolitionist Action Committee, and so many other things. Just grateful to be here with you, grateful for this space that we have in a slightly cooler environment. Thanks to everybody who's part of the straw poll that chose with unanimity inside. So we are inside. Welcome, those seats throughout, and come on in. Slide on in right there. So the reason that we're gathered here, are we not? Okay, good. The reason that we're gathered here first is because this is the 33rd Annual Fast and Vigil to Abolish the Death Penalty at the U.S. Supreme Court. We've been here, many of us fasting, since Sunday the 28th, or technically started at midnight, the night of the 28th, and we will go until the end of the day on the 2nd, which is tomorrow. Why? June 29th is the 54th anniversary of the Herman decision by the U.S. Supreme Court, which struck down all the death penalty laws in the country, forcing any state that wanted to have a death penalty to write new laws. And July 2nd is the 50th anniversary of the Gregg decision, which upheld those new laws. And we've been doing this for 33 years. And we're starving for justice. This is one of the places that was a regular visitation spot, a regular, gotta figure out how to be there for our friend Magdaleno Rose-Avila, who died on May 7th. And we're remembering him tonight too. I want to welcome everybody here that's a friend of Magdaleno's family, including, of course, his lovely wife, Carolyn. Aviva. And Bobby and others who are here, and we're just grateful. Tonight is going to be a little bit different than what we have been doing, in that most of the speakers tonight actually knew Magdaleno and spent time with him, and we'll be able to reflect on them as they tell their stories as voices of experience on the death penalty. Magdaleno was very committed to ending the death penalty, and this picture back here is him speaking at this event some years ago. I'm not sure do we know what year that was? No. So that's what it is.
2000.
Say it again.
The banner says 2011, so it might be.
Yeah, there you go. And because of that, we're laughing. You win a prize and get to come forward and greet us all with a song.
Thank you, Abe, and my deep condolences to the family of Magdaleno. I would meet him when he would come every year to this fast and vigil, and I was always struck by how witty he was, and also how much he loved being in this community, and what a great presence he was. Such a tireless defender of human rights, and standing for justice everywhere, and standing in front of this un-Supreme Court to end state-sanctioned killing. So we say, Magdaleno, presente. So this song was inspired by the words of Ella Baker, the great civil rights she wrote. And Magpie put it to the song, and some of you may know it, so please sing along with me. It's called Give Light. Give light, and people will find the way. Give light, and people will find the way. Give light, and people will find the way. People will find the way, I do believe. And Magdaleno was one of those people who gave the light to so many and opened their eyes and hearts to the way of justice, peace, and nonviolence. Give light, and people will find the way. Give light, and people will find the way. Give light, and people will find the way. People will find the way, I do believe. Reach out, and people will find the way. Reach out, and people will find the way. Reach out, and people will find the way. People will find the way, I do believe. Stand together, and people will find the way. Stand together, people will find the way. Stand together, people will find the way. People will find the way, I do believe. Teach peace, and people will find the way. Teach peace, and people will find the way. Teach peace, and people will find the way. People will find the way, I do believe. Act for justice, and people will find the way. Act for justice, and people will find the way. Act for justice, and people will find the way. People will find the way, I do believe. Give light, give light, and people will find the way. Give light, and people will find the way. Give light, and people will find the way. People will find the way, I do believe. You're a great choir. Thank you.
Thank you, Art. And I want to recommend for each of the people that are speaking, come up on this side so that you can avoid the cord and the step. Today we're gathering not just to mark the anniversaries that were here during a fast and vigil, but also to recognize several people who have died, most notably Magdaleno Rose-Avila, middle name Marcos. I've been reminded by his sister, one of his many sisters. And greetings and welcome to everybody that is watching on the live stream. We're grateful that you were able to join us in this way, and hopefully our technology will continue to work perfectly and seamlessly. There is so much that could be said and has been said and will be said about Lena, or Magdaleno, or Magdad, as some of us would hear in La Paz. And we're going to hear from a few people about that tonight. I want to share a few things about the gifts that Magdaleno gave to me and really to all of us. Now, come on in, there's plenty of seats up here. Welcome. And especially for those of us who knew Magdaleno, I want to invite you, all of us really, to close your eyes and think about your favorite memory of Magdaleno. I want to share one of mine. Couple of mine. You don't have to keep your eyes closed. Come on in, there's plenty of room up front. And you can also grab chairs in the back and add them to the room. So, Magdaleno and I, our history goes back to, well, we met on this march in 1990. I want to share that story in a moment. But first, after knowing Magdaleno for a while, one of his tricks as an organizer was to think about who he knew who could do what he needed to have done, and then call them and say, hey, who do you know who can do this? and that's what he did to me. And that's how I ended up working with him as his assistant. He was the executive director of the Chavez Foundation, and we lived in this, in the mountains, the hills between Bakersfield and Tehachapi. These are actually the hills that are spoken about in the opening of the book, The Grapes of Wrath, if you've read that book. And so it's a beautiful space. And it's about 2/3 of the way up from Bakersfield to Tehachapi. And it's just a beautiful environment. So when we got there, the staff that lives there lives in a mobile home trailer kind of environment. And so he and I were sharing a mobile home. And one day I woke up and he was waiting for me before I headed out to go to the office, which was just, a 200-yard walk or so. But he had some news. And he was so excited, but it also meant bad news for me in a way. I had to move out. I had to move out because Aviva was coming to stay for the summer. And at that time, she was quite young. And of course, she had to have her own room and all of that. So that was fine with me. I knew that I would be, I'll find somebody else to live with in the space, and all that was good. And, okay, we talked about it. And as I walked off towards the office, I heard this voice, and please forgive me. But oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. I've got a beautiful feeling. Everything's going my way. The song from Oklahoma. I know you're enjoying this. And that's one of my favorite memories is he's out there checking his jalapenos and the plants that he was growing, and I had this sound in my head as I'm walking to the office, and that's one of my favorite memories of Magdaleno. It brings me back to that moment every time I see something about Oklahoma, whether I'm going there for another killing, or I'm actually seeing the broadcast of the film, whatever it is, it makes me think of our friend Magdaleno. So cherish those memories and make more memories like that for the people around you. I want to invite Terri Steinberg to come up, and Herman, you're on deck. No, I don't want to. Terri Steinberg, she'll tell us a little bit about how we got to know her, but I know her as one of the most caring and giving and loving and passionate people who is not just about her family at home, but her broader family. And she's got some news for us that is going to expand our family sooner, hopefully, rather than later.
Mike. The first time I met Magdaleno, I had gone to a conference, one of the death penalty conferences. I think it was probably NCADP, and he was the keynote speaker. And he was such a gifted speaker. Not only could he heavy laughing and crying. His wit was just incredible. He told the best stories, and I just remember thinking, wow, he must be really famous. He was just so good. And I never thought that I would get to know him.
Terry, you gotta get right up on the mic.
I never thought that I would get to know him because he's so famous. He's so important. But he was also so humble and so generous with his time. His heart was bigger than he was, and he was a big guy at times. But he had the biggest heart and the kindest spirit, and he always made you feel like you were the most important person he was talking to at that moment. He was so good at that. And you wonder, what was I doing? Well, definitely. I was just a normal, everyday housewife, mother, 4 kids. But in 2001, my son was sentenced to die for a crime he didn't commit. And I knew at that time I was going to have to do something to try and save his life. And so I came down here 2 days after my son was sentenced to die with a picture begging people, please help me. I need to save my son. Does he look like a monster to you? And that's what they called him in court every day. They would call him a monster and say he wasn't fit to live. I remember sitting in that courtroom wanting to yell, that's my son you're talking about. It's my child. And that's where I met Abe, and I met Gil Felke, and it became part of this journey of hope. And it allowed me to not only get to know Magdaleno, but to do something positive with my pain, to also be empowered to go out and help save my son. I know I couldn't have done it without all of you and without our dear friend, Magdaleno. His helpingness and this laugh and this joyous way of being. It gave me the strength to keep my eye on the prize and hold on. It's been 25 years since that day that I walked into the front of the Supreme Court looking for help. And I've had the opportunity to share my story and hopefully do something positive with the pain that my family has suffered. Hopefully talk to young people and tell them about the choices that they make and how the choices they make not only affect themselves, but affect their families, in the hopes that they would make better choices for themselves. And I know every year when I came, when Magdaleno joined us here in front of the Supreme Court, he was always asking how my son was doing, giving me positive words of encouragement, not only from me, but to bring to him. And every time I met him, he had something different. I would learn something new about him. Some other path that he had taken, some other part of human rights that he had worked on that I probably hadn't even thought about before. But he opened my eyes to so many different ways that we can go out and do good and make a difference. And he lived his life to serve others, and he did it well. And I pray that at the end of the day, I looked at his son. So, thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts on Magdaleno. And right now we are waiting to see what's going to happen with my son's case. It's been overturned again by the 4th Circuit. And now it's in the hands of the prosecutor to decide what they're going to do with it. And we're going to pray that by next year, Justin will be here with us.
Yes.
I'm sorry that he never got to meet Magdaleno. But I know that my son knows, and I know that Magdaleno is always encouraging us and helping us carry this cross that we've been given to bear. And for that, I am very grateful.
Terry, did you want to share a little bit more of the story? You don't have to. Just a little background for the people that don't know.
Okay. Um, so what happened in my family was, there was a young man named Dyan who was shot and killed by another young man named Owen. When Owen was arrested, he was threatened by the arresting officer with the death penalty. And he was told that if he didn't blame this on somebody else, my son, that he was going to face death. So after a few weeks of being threatened with the death penalty, he decided to do what the prosecutors asked and told them that my son asked him to kill Dyan. Now, what Owen had done, shooting and killing a young man who had been selling drugs, it was $500,000 worth of drugs found in his person when he was murdered. And shooting him is not a capital crime. But Dyan was the son of a Secret Service agent. And so they wanted the ultimate punishment for the crime that was committed. And so they created a way to make that happen, and that was to say, call it murder for hire. So Owen said, my son asked him to do it. And I remember my son calling me up and saying, Mom, I'm going to have to turn myself in. They think I had something to do with Danny's death. He said, I might have to do some time because I've been selling marijuana. But it was just marijuana. It's my first offense. I should be home in a few days. Please don't worry. It was 25 years ago. What happens to a family when one of them goes to jail is we all go to jail. And when one of them is sentenced to die, we die a little bit each day. Every holiday, every birthday, every day is overshadowed by the fact that that brother is not only not home, but is being threatened with the death penalty. 5 years after my son was arrested and went off to death row, Owen tried to tell the truth, saying that my son had nothing to do with this. But he was threatened with the prosecution again, that if he testified on his son's behalf, that they would retry him and send him to death row. And so he didn't do it. He didn't testify. In 2010, we were before the federal court, and the Innocence Project at UVA Law School had gotten involved, and they found all kinds of evidence that had come out. Boxes and boxes. They're all in my basement now. I don't know what to do with those. Hopefully they were gone for. Anyway, they found all this evidence, and one of them was that handwritten note from the arresting officer who said, in his own handwriting, I told Owen Barber that he had to put this on Justin Wolf or he was going to death. This piece of evidence was withheld from the first jury, and it came out in that courtroom that day in 2010. The prosecutor also had to testify. Owen testified, and he said Justin clearly had nothing to do with this, that the only reason he blamed it on Justin was because he was forced to, because he didn't want to face a death sentence. The prosecutor testified that not only had he withheld evidence, because when you give the evidence to the defense, they fabricate a defense. So he admitted withholding evidence. He admitted that he put witnesses together the night before they were to testify in order for them to get the story straight. The judge was furious. He couldn't believe that this was the practice that this prosecutor did in his office. And soon thereafter, that judge overturned my son's conviction, vacated all of his sentences, and sent him back to Manassas, where the crime was originally committed, for him to be either released or retried in 120 days. 120 days came and went. We were in court every week with various petitions. And finally, we went back to court and said, hey, it's been over 120 days and he still hasn't been released or retried. So that judge ordered him to be released. So on January 3rd, 2013, we all piled into my neighbor's car because the minivan that I had been driving had died and we did not fit in my car. So we borrowed the neighbor's car and we drove to Manassas to pick him up. And 45 minutes before he was to walk out the door, the Attorney General stayed his release, and so he wasn't able to come home. And I learned the meaning of cruel and unusual punishment in the car that day as I looked at the faces of his brothers and sisters who had so anxiously awaited him coming home, only to be told that he wasn't. So that was 2013, and then by 2016, my son had been held in solitary confinement for over 5,000 days. Imagine living in a room no bigger than a bathroom. You can touch the walls with both hands, not talk to anybody, not be able to hug your family, take any classes, do anything like a normal person would be able to do. And after 5,000 days of solitary confinement, he was starting to have tremors. He was losing weight, he was having nightmares. And they realized that, they recognized that, and they decided to make him a deal. He made the deal, offered him, if he would admit to having killed Danny, that he would probably only have to face 10 more years in prison, that he wouldn't go back to death row. He wanted to ask me what to do, but the prison phone lines were all tapped. They listened to everything you say, letters are read. His lawyer recommended that he doesn't talk to me about it by phone or by letter, because they would read it and they would know what we were thinking. And so my son wrote a letter to me to ask me what to do. And he gave that letter to his lawyer and asked his lawyer to give it to me, and that I was to give the answer to one of the other lawyers as to what I felt that we should do. And I had been doing this for a long time, and I had learned a lot about murdered family members and the need for healing, and all about love and compassion and all of those things. And the lawyer never gave me the letter. So I wasn't able to guide him and tell him what he should do until he had already taken the lead. So after 15 years of his story never wavering, always professing his innocence, always telling the same thing, he now had to say he was guilty in order to possibly see the light of day. When I did see the letter that he'd written me, he said, "Mom, they want me to take this deal, and I'm not sure I'm going to win in court." He says, "I may never come home if I don't take this deal. But if you think we should keep fighting, I will. But the lawyer thinks that it's best that we take the deal." Plus, they had told him that he thought he'd only have 10 more years, and he said, "Mom, it took me 10 years to get it returned to begin with." At this point, his brother had had a couple children he never had a chance to hold. We hadn't touched him in 11 years. And by the time I knew what was going on, the deal was already done. So they sentenced him to 20 more years, not 10 like they promised, but 20. And so he's been in general population since 2016. He has done pretty well. He's gotten his, he's taken classes, he's done some good things. But recently, there's been a new twist in the case, and it looks like things are looking up. Things are still a little delicate, so I can't really say too much on Facebook. But there's a good chance that next year my son could possibly be here with us.
Yeah.
The state recognizes they don't have evidence to convict him of murder. And I'm glad after 25 years they finally figured that out. But we'll never get these years back. I just pray for the day that he comes home and our family can finally start healing. But I do know that I would never have survived the past 25 years without the help of this community of saints that has carried me in good times and bad. And I am so grateful for each one of you. And I come back here every year and I'm inspired to keep going and face another day. And I know him coming home is not going to be easy. He's going to have a lot of things to get used to and adjust to, but we've done hard things before. We can do this. I look forward to telling you more when I'm allowed to, but it's good. Maybe he's born some strength for me.
I want to invite anybody that is having a difficult time hearing to come and fill up some of the emptier seats up front, because it's louder up front closer to the speaker. So as a person wearing hearing aids, I can tell you, sit right next to Allie, you'll be fine. So I have here a eulogy that was written in did a memorial a few weeks ago in Los Angeles. I'm not going to read all of this, but one thing I will read is the job history.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
I don't have a lot of jobs. Among them, he worked with the United Farm Workers, Amnesty International, USA, Democratic National Committee, Witness to Innocence, Death Penalty Focus, Journey of Hope, Homies Unidos, the Peace Corps. He was a Peace Corps director in 4 countries. Nicaragua, Paraguay, Micronesia, and Guatemala. In Guatemala, I think it was when there were some pretty hairy scenes that he saw in the mid-'80s, when there was lots of death squad activity going on. And he was right there confronting the authorities. The Northwest Immigrant Human Rights Project, Social Justice Fund Northwest, and the Seattle Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs, who was the director, the first director of that agency. He fought for farm workers, immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers, deported people, young people impacted by violence, and those condemned to death, and more. What we don't even know very much about are the people that he was working with on the border, and driving around, dropping off soaps and stuff from all kinds of things. Whatever he could do, he would tell people that's what he was doing. We have with us from one of the agencies that Magdaleno worked for, the executive director of Witness to Innocence. So welcome, Herman Lindsey.
How everybody doing?
Hey.
When I was asked to speak, I was asked to speak about my story. I wasn't aware that we was going to be speaking about it. Right? And the thing about it is, wearing a title, the same title he wore, the ED, Witness to Innocence, is very difficult for me at this time, because we was just in Arizona and I seen him in Seattle a while back. And every time we talk, I mean, there is no program that we could be on a Zoom or a program that we're attending that me and Leno is not going to disturb each other and being honored to each other. You know, I call him the godfather of the death penalty movement. Leno has played a big part in my being now today. Actually, he has. I can remember, and I don't know if you remember this, Carolyn. When Leno was the executive director, I didn't want to be a part of no organization when I first came. I didn't want to be a part of no organization. I didn't want to speak. I just wanted to stay to myself. Christine Henderson kept telling me, you need to meet Leno. You need to meet Leno. And I was like, okay, I'll talk to him. So when you get on the phone, it's like this cool, collective person. I didn't see him in person. I just heard him on the phone. And we was talking, and they was like, we want you to be the board chair. So him and Nathan Field, they like, we want you to be a board chairman, the chairman of the board. I'm like, I don't want to be no chairman of the board. They said, we got to guide you. You can do a great job. And I'm like, I tell you what, I come on the board, but I won't be the chair. And little did I know, in exchange for that, right? Let me back up something. In exchange for me accepting being on the board, Leno was supposed to treat me to a place called Homeboy Industries in California. So I wanted to go to California, so I'm like, yeah, we could do it. Right? So I go now, and it's like a relationship started from that point. And I always mess with Leno as this person, because Leno has a unique style. He's like, to me, he's like Master Splinter from the Ninja Turtles. It's not funny, but he's like the Master Splinter where he teaches you without even teaching you. And if you look at Leno sit back and he always leaning. He's like, well, you know, that'll be a good move for you though. And he convinced you in a great way. But we have to develop that relationship where no matter where you at, we have to say a crack on each other. We have to say a joke on each other. I mean, we just speak out loud. And so, for me, Leno was a great inspiration. And he started me on the journey to be executive director. And as I told him before, as we was talking, we had to sit down and talk. It's a great honor to follow behind his footsteps. Leno taught me many great things, and the most proudest thing I like about Leno is that he's about the community. He dived into the Latino community and brought them together and helped fight with our causes. He reached out to other communities, and the thing about it is the way he sit in calm and wealthy splendor. What you call those things that
Suspenders.
Suspenders. I call it suspenders. Suspenders. And that hat. You would never know he's such a great poet and writer. He did some of the amazing work. And I think y'all should read some of his stories and some of his pieces, because he wouldn't tell me right now. Right now, Leno wouldn't tell me to miss him. He wouldn't tell me to miss him. He would tell me to use the strength to get stronger, and that he'll buy me a margarita when I get up that with him. So, this is very emotional for me. But that first trip I ever went was to the Homeboys. We had the fundraiser at the attorney office.
Paul Hoffman's office.
Hoffman.
Yeah.
Hoffman.
No. I can't do names too good. I know you. I remember Susan Welby. What? Susan
Welby.
Welby. So I do remember something.
Yeah.
She was hot.
I was watching.
She may be watching.
Oh, sorry, Susan. But as we go on, we still have a long journey, and even though Leno be missed, he'll be with us. When you sit back and you tell me to think about my favorite moment, I'll be here all day. So I can't do that, but I do know I carry him inside. He helped me become the man I am. It started me on my journey. And I thank you for doing this for him. I thank Amnesty and what that is, Nanda and Scott, thank God for putting this together, and be proud. And it is so great to see you after all these years. We got to catch up. I'm gonna take you to Homeboys Industry.
Herman, can you give us a 2-minute version of the story?
Yeah. So basically, 2 minutes.
Take 5. Whatever, just give us a taste of it. He's gonna be talking more tomorrow.
You sure about that? So, 2-minute version.
Basically, what it was is a case where a police officer wanted to, just got appointed to homicide department, working on a court case. He didn't do proper investigation. And after 12 years after the crime happened, he chose 2 people to arrest for the crime, me and Magdaleno Rose-Avila. When they first arrested me, I thought it was a joke. You know, I thought it was laughing because I grew up on Hawaii 5-0 and Matlock and all that. And I knew when you just get your man, you know, that's just the TV version, you know. Matlock will go out and find a real person, right? Steve on Hawaii 5-0, he's gonna make sure you got the right person, but he's gonna get the right person. This investigator didn't care. So I was arrested, and it was funny to me because I knew you got the wrong person, and I'm making a fool of the police officer, you know. But they took it a little too far. They went and actually charged me with it. And when I seen they was charging me with it, I went ahead and did the man for speedy trial because I wasn't afraid, because I didn't commit a crime. But what was presented as evidence was one, a big screen projector of the worst picture of the victim at the time of the crime scene. 2, they put a pawn shop slip in there that I had admitted to the police back in 1994 that I had been there. And the pawn shop slip was dated like months before this even happened, you know. And the next piece of evidence they used was my ex-wife, Nikki. And that was the most, that evidence there should have a flat red flag majority. Because that's when first time I ever seen the state try to impeach their own witness. And I might have got myself in trouble because my state attorney and my ex-wife arguing back and forth because she didn't say the right thing that she was rehearsed to say. And I started laughing, and I shouldn't have started laughing, but I mean, I was sitting there like, imagining like, listen, man, you arguing with her, dude, you're not. You know, I argued with her so long that she, you know, you're not going in. And eventually the judge told her to tell the truth, and she said, if I got to tell the truth, that I told the police I don't know anything about Herman being involved in this. I only gave that statement because they was harassing me at my job, threatening to take my kids, and they told me they were going to give me a $10,000 reward that they didn't kill. The last piece of evidence was Mark Sims. Mark Sims said he was in the holding cell with me and said that I confessed to him in the crimes. Later, after being convicted of just with that evidence there, no fingerprints, no eyewitnesses, no nothing. We found evidence that was in the police investigation discovery that a guy named Eddie Carter gave the police a statement back in 1994 that Mark Sims was walking around bragging that he killed the person in the pawn shop. And with that, the Florida Supreme Court reviewed my case after I was voted into the death penalty 8-3 and on direct appeal. The first time in the history of Florida, all 7 judges ruled I should have never even been convicted. So now I'm here, I'm on my journey with Eve, Kathleen over there. Now I knew Amanda and many other organizations that send me here. And we're going to find a way to chip at this death penalty and make it resolve.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, can I say one more thing?
Of course.
This is off the record, right? This is off
Live
the record.
stream, so it's not really.
If Suzanne don't do my hair by tomorrow, she's been practicing me for what, 6 years now?
More than that.
4 years now? I'll put you.
So many.
He's got some eyebrows there. He cut those.
No problem. Take care of it.
You all right? You all right over there? Thank you, Herman. I want to tell you how I met Magdaleno. There was a march, some of you may have heard about this a long time ago, I think it was 1991 or 1990, but there was a march happening from Stark, Florida, which is where the death row is and the executions take place in Florida. And the march was to Atlanta, Georgia, and to end specifically at Ebenezer Baptist Church, Martin Luther King's church. And Magdaleno at that time was the director of Amnesty's program to abolish the death penalty. So a friend of mine, Dave Stantz from Minneapolis, drove down through Columbus, Ohio, where I live, and we drove on down to Atlanta. And he was, I think he was on the board of Amnesty at the time, but either way, he was connected. He knew Magdaleno. We got there to the Amnesty office. The march was approaching Atlanta, but he was there organizing in the office. And we got in, and he's on the phone. So we're seated in two chairs in front of Magdaleno's desk, waiting for him to get off the phone. I wasn't listening to what the phone call was about, but he was pretty disappointed in something, but conciliatory. And he hung up the phone, and he said, "Great, where am I going to find a Jew at this late date?" I've never met him. But I said, "Well, I'm Jewish, but what is it that you need?" And he said, "Well, the rabbi who was supposed to speak that evening has just had to cancel, and I need somebody who can speak to the Jewish perspective on the death penalty. And can you do that?" And I said, "Well, can I make a few phone calls? Because I've never clue." And he said, "There's the phone." So I got on the phone, I called my mom, I called a few other rabbis. My mom's not a rabbi, but she's a graduate of the Jewish Theological Seminary in America, and a Bible teacher, and all that. But a few rabbis, and together with these conversations, I was able to piece together the story in a nutshell, being that Jewish law allows for the death penalty, but sets forth so many preconditions that must be in place that you can never really have an execution by Jewish law, because the rabbis say, yes, we have death penalty, but it's not for us to do it. And this has been Jewish law on the death penalty for over 2,000 years. So, that night, I had no idea where we were going, but it was Ebenezer Baptist Church, the original one, Martin Luther King's church. And on that pulpit, and if you were a big shot, meaning like Jack Healy, the executive director of Amnesty International, or Henry Schwarzschild, the executive director of the ACLU at the time, or Bernice King, if you were a big shot, you were supposed to have 5 minutes. If you were a little shot, like me, you got 3 minutes. Well, everybody did their whole spiel. It was 20 minutes for each speaker. By the time I got up, 2/3 of the place had left. But Magdaleno was still there, and I got up and I did my piece, and it was 8 minutes when he pulled me up. But that's how I met Magdaleno, and ever since then, we worked together. We went to places together. I slept on the floor in his hotel rooms. You probably know, some of you are on YouTube, that he liked to keep the hotel about 85 degrees. Awful. So I was found a different place after that. So many stories, but I wanted to share that one because it's quintessential Magdaleno. Find somebody who can do something and keep moving. Even if you have no idea if they're really going to be able to pull it through. And that's so many that is among the many lessons that has informed how I do my work. And I know it's very frustrating with so many people, but I was taught by this great guy that you can always pull something out of the hat. And like we're doing tonight, in this room instead of being outside.
Thank you for that.
Is Marshall here? There he is. I couldn't find you in there. But our next speaker is actually an allianceman, a fellow Jew. We work together. Sometimes we're out within fighting Jews against the death penalty. But Marshall has been also a mentor in a way to me, and a person that has helped guide me in some ways over the many years. And it is my pleasure to introduce the recently retired federal public defender, Marshall Dyan.
Thank you, Abe. Can everybody hear me? Yes. You know, Abe has told everyone to keep it short. It's particularly easy for me. I start that way because several speakers have talked about how witty Leno was. And he was. And he was a great storyteller. And the first time I met him, it was actually a mano a mano joke fest and story fest between him and Sister Helen Prejean, who happens to be pretty witty herself and is a heck of a storyteller. So I wanted to start with the joke, and I'm going to start with a second joke. Abe, I was very impressed with that resume that you gave of Leno's. The man couldn't hold a job. Let's see. So when I met Leno, it was at a death penalty event in, I think, the late 80s or the early 90s. And he had with him, because it was him and Helen up at the front, and he had with him these puppets. Yes. And they were boxing puppets.
Sister Pugilista.
And exactly, Sister Pugilista. And it was Leno and Helen swapping stories and swapping jokes, and the two puppets were fighting each other. And I thought, this is a guy who I want to stay in touch with, and I want to get to know. And it was really a pleasure for me to get to know Leno, and we will all miss him so terribly. But the thing about it is, Leno set an example for all of us that we keep working for human rights. No matter what, we keep working for human rights presente. And I'm grateful for the lessons that I learned, and I'm grateful for that particular teaching, presente. I want to share with you just a little bit about my work representing people who were charged with or convicted of capital crimes. I was a student at the University of Georgia in the spring of 1980, when the state of Georgia announced it was going to carry out its first execution in 20 years. I never thought about the death penalty, but didn't know about it. It was just 4 years after Gregg. Georgia had not had an execution. But I heard about this on the campus radio station, and I thought to myself, in a democratic republic, we're all the government. And so if the government's going to kill somebody, that means I'm going to kill somebody. I don't know if I feel comfortable with that. So I decided to drive the 50 miles from Athens, Georgia to Atlanta, Georgia for a vigil the night before the scheduled execution. And I found myself in the Central Presbyterian Church in downtown Atlanta, directly across the street from the Georgia State Capitol. And I heard clergy people and I heard lawyers talking about the death penalty, and it was a terrible case. The man had been convicted of killing a police officer when the police showed up to serve a warrant on him for another crime. And instead of accepting the arrest warrant, he began a gunfight. And during the course of the gunfight, he killed a police officer, and he himself got shot in the mouth. So he was tried for first-degree murder and sentenced to death in Georgia. And the Georgia Department of Corrections decided, well, he's sentenced to death. There's no reason to give him any dental work.
Oh, wow.
And so for 2 years, he didn't eat solid food. And he decided, I think I'd rather be executed than spend the rest of my life not eating solid food. And so we were there in that church the night before Jack Potts was to be executed by the state of Georgia. And as I sat in the pew of that church, I thought about my own faith tradition, which Abe has shared with you. And in my faith tradition, instead of completing the creation of the universe in 6 days, the Almighty created us to be partners in completing the creation of the universe, to be partners in bringing about the kind of world that all of us want to live in. And that's an obligation for all of us. And that's my own personal theology and the theology that I was taught. And I thought, how can we throw away any human being who has this sacred obligation to help complete the creation of the universe? And I found myself nauseous and weeping at the idea that the state of Georgia was going to involuntarily put blood on my hands. And I couldn't make the nausea go away until a light bulb went off over my head. I'll go to law school and become a capital defender so that I can do everything that I can personally do to try to keep the blood off my hands. And so that's what I did. And I represented people who were charged with or convicted of capital crimes for 37 years. But I've been involved in this movement since 1980, and though I retired from the practice of law and do not miss it for a second, I'm still very active in Pennsylvanians Against the Death Penalty. I still visit former clients who are on death row, and I still work to put the other lawyers who are representing people who are charged with or convicted of capital crimes out of work. And that's what I think we can all do. One last story, and I tell this story advisedly because it's not easy for me to tell, but Kathleen asked me to tell this story. So I was appointed to represent a man in North Carolina named David Lawson. David had grown up in Michigan. His parents separated when he was 2 years old. His mother did not think that she could both continue to work full-time and raise him. So at 2, she left him with her parents, his maternal grandparents, who shared with me that from the time he got up in the morning to the time he went to bed at night for 2 years, all he would do is stare out the window waiting for his mother to come back. When he was 4, his mother remarried and took him away from these grandparents who he had come to know and was comfortable living with, and taken into a new environment with a stepfather who did not care for him and didn't want somebody else's son in his house. His stepfather was an alcoholic and would beat David's mother, and when David reached the age of 10, he actually tackled his stepfather to prevent his stepfather from beating his mom. At which point his stepfather said to David's mother, either he goes or I go, and they put him out of the house. And he lived on the streets of Mount Pleasant, Michigan, and was taken in by some older guys who said, we'll take care of you, but you gotta act as a lookout when we commit break-ins. And so that's what he learned. He learned to commit break-ins. And that's the sort of life he lived. He moved to North Carolina when he was 18 years old, having been rejected. He tried to enlist in the Army, but they said, no, you have flat feet. And he was not accepted into the Army. So yet another rejection. He moved to North Carolina to try and find his birth father because he heard his birth father was living in North Carolina. And I got an opportunity to speak with a woman who worked at the Salvation Army in Salisbury, North Carolina, who remembered taking David to meet his birth father, who said, "Don't you think if I'd wanted a son, you'd have heard from me before now?" So David had a very difficult life. I'm not trying to excuse the fact that he committed a terrible homicide. I'm just explaining to you the kind of life that he lived before he committed a homicide. And he did commit a homicide. And he was identified because he shot and killed one man and shot that man's father, but that father survived. And the father was able to identify David. And so he was arrested and tried. And when he was convicted of murder, he decided to tell the jury, "You've convicted me. You may as well sentence me to death." And the jury said, "Fine." And it obliged him. And he was sentenced to death. And when he was sent to Central Prison in Raleigh, North Carolina, he was required to go see a psychologist. And the psychologist met with him for a few times and said, "You know, David, I don't think I've ever met anyone who has bipolar disorder worse than you. I'd like you to get seen by the psychiatrist." And at first David said no, but then he said, "Yeah, okay." And he went and saw the psychiatrist, and over the course of a few weeks, the psychiatrist diagnosed him with both bipolar disorder and severe anxiety disorder, which made sense to me because one of the things that his aunt in Michigan told me was that when his mother would take him over to her house, he would wrap his hair around his finger and yank it out, which is apparently a symptom of pretty severe anxiety disorder. So in any case, David got treated with medication. And the next time I went to see him in prison, it was like I was meeting a completely different guy. He was just a different human being. And he said to me, "Marshall, since I've been on this medication, it's hit me like a ton of bricks. How awful it is what I did, that I took the life of another human being, that I robbed parents of a son, I robbed the wife of a husband, I robbed children of a father. And I got to figure out how to do something about this to try and balance the moral scales." He said, "Can I write to the family and apologize?" I said, "Yeah, I don't want you to do it more than once, and I don't know that they're going to take it very well, but if you want to write them, you can write them." And he did. The next time I went to see him, he said, "You know, are there any journalists that ever want to talk to death row inmates?" I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, you know, I was undiagnosed and didn't realize that I was ill. And there may be other people out there who, like me, are undiagnosed. And maybe if they hear my story, maybe they'll go seek treatment." And I said, "Well, David, there's a saying in journalism, if it bleeds, it leads. Journalists always want to talk to death row inmates." He said, "Get them, bring them to me. I want to talk to them. I'll answer whatever questions they have, but I want to tell them about what happened to me and how I got treated, because it might help somebody else, and that might help me balance the scales." Over the course of years, we litigated his case, but we kept losing court after court after court. Finally, he says to me, "I want you to call Phil Donahue." Are there people in this room who know who Phil Donahue was? For those of you who don't, Phil Donahue was Oprah Winfrey before Oprah Winfrey. He had a national talk show where he would bring guests on and tell stories and interview people. And so I did what David asked. We contacted Phil Donahue, told Metro Media Incorporated, the owner of the Donahue Show, about David's story, and they said, "Yeah, we want to do a story." And so I went to New York, David's psychologist went to New York, David's cousin went to New York. The Donahue folks flew down to North Carolina. They interviewed David in Central Prison. They interviewed the victims' family members. And the show aired the morning before David's execution in 1994. And I had the opportunity to sit in Central Prison in Raleigh, North Carolina, and watch that Donahue show with him. And later that night, I went back into the prison because I felt it was really, really important. North Carolina was going to carry out its first gas chamber execution since 1962. And I thought David needs to have a lawyer here because this might not go well. And so I went back into the prison to be a witness. Not only did I want to be there as an attorney, but I also thought it was really important for David to be able to look into that visitation room and see the eyes of someone that didn't hate him. Because the victims' family members were there, some of them law enforcement officers were there, prosecutors were there. And I wanted him to be able to look at someone's face who loved him. And I told him, David, look at my eyes. And so, at 2 a.m. in the morning, a pellet was dropped into, a cyanide pellet was dropped into a bucket of acid, and a cloud of gas rose up. And I watched David turn color. White, bright, bright, bright red. And he gathered himself and he shouted out, I am human. And he took another breath and he began to lose some bodily functions. And he stretched against the leather strap so severely that the strap on his leg broke. But he gathered himself and he shouted out again, I am human. And he did that after every breath until he couldn't say that whole sentence anymore and said, human. And a couple minutes later, he could just say, Hume. And a couple minutes later, he could just grunt to let us know that he was still alive. And so at 2:01 in the morning, North Carolina began his execution. And at 2:13 in the morning, it concluded. And 5 minutes later, they called it, because there has to be 5 minutes of a flat line on an EKG. And I saw David's death certificate, and it said cause of death, homicide. Because that's what it was. And I was pretty busted up for a while. I was in pretty bad shape. I had other appeals, but I had a really hard time writing them. I had to get some colleagues to help me write some appeals. The North Carolina Supreme Court was very generous with me. It gave me extension after extension after extension. But finally, they said, you know, we got to get things rolling here. And, you know, 6 months later, I looked back on it and I went, aha, that's what a major depressive episode is like. So, in the fall of that year, the fall of 1994, the Jewish high holidays approached. And for those of you who do not know, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are very, very important Jewish holidays. And there's 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur when we're obligated to think about our lives, to think about what we've done that hasn't been the best, and to think about how do we correct that, and how do we repent. The Hebrew word is teshuvah, which means to turn. And the idea is that you turn away from making mistakes. You turn away from doing evil. You turn back to doing what you know is right. And as I approached those holidays, I thought, gosh, I've never met anybody who tried harder than David Lawson to make teshuvah, right? To turn his life around, to try and balance, in his term, to balance the moral scales. And it was a really rough fall for me. So the next summer, I decided I'm going to go to a retreat. I found there was this religious retreat in Boston. And I'm going to go to this religious retreat for 5 days of prayer and study. It's just what I need. And I get up there, it was held at Brandeis University, and on the very first morning, I'm sitting having breakfast, and some people ask me, what do you do? And I'm thinking, well, I can tell them or not. Well, I'm a lawyer. Well, what kind of lawyer? Criminal defense lawyer. Well, what kind of cases do you do? Well, I do death penalty cases. Oh, you do death penalty cases? Did you meet Andrew? I said, who's Andrew? They say, Andrew's this guy we just met from New Jersey who served on a capital jury. Interesting. So we go from breakfast to our morning prayers, and I usually take my morning prayers pretty seriously. But that morning, I could not. All I could think about was, gosh, I've come to this retreat. I've come to get, a little spiritual renewal. And there's a guy here in this community who served on a capital jury. This makes me sick. And I really couldn't concentrate. So after services were over, I went up to a rabbi, because at this retreat, there was no shortage of rabbis. And I tell them what's going on. And they say to me, do you know the Yiddish word b'shert? No, I don't speak Yiddish. They say, the rabbi says to me, b'shert, it's like serendipity. It's kismet. You and Andrew are here for a reason. It's b'shert that you're both here. You need to go talk to Andrew. And I'm shaking my head like this, and I'm thinking in my heart, are you kidding me? This is the last person I want to go talk to. Let me, here's what's going on in my head. Imagine, if you will, that somebody comes up to you, Rabbi, and says, there's this racist in the room. Would you say, well, it's b'shert, you got to go talk to the racist? So I go to my first class, and guess who's in class with me? Yes, Andrew. So after class, I go up, I introduce myself, and start talking. He starts telling me about his experience serving on a jury where they are asked to decide whether someone lives or dies. Holy cow. How am I supposed to figure out how to answer that question, he says to me. You're not trained. He was not trained. None of us are trained to figure out how to do that. So we tried really hard to listen to the judge's instructions. We tried to do the best we could. Okay, let me tell you about my experience and why I went into doing death penalty work. Over the course of 5 days, we had several conversations. I promise the story is coming to a close. On the last day, he comes up to me in the morning while I'm eating breakfast. He says, can we go talk? I said, I'm eating my Rice Krispies here. I said, of course we can go talk. We go for a walk. He says, when the jury retired to deliberate at the guilt phase, not life or death, just whether or not this person is guilty or not guilty of murder under New Jersey law. We go into the jury room, we know we're supposed to pick a four-person, we pick a four-person, but then what do you do? We had no idea how we were supposed to start. So somebody said, well, why don't we just go around the room and take a straw poll? And so we went around the room, and each person was asked, do you think he's guilty or not guilty? And the first person said guilty, and the second person said guilty, and the third person said guilty, and they went all the way around the room, and finally, the last person said, well, I'm not really convinced. Because that last person said, I'm not really convinced, they actually had to start to talk about what did the state prove? Did they prove it beyond a reasonable doubt? Did they prove every element? Did the defense poke any holes in anything? 5 hours later, they ultimately decide, yeah, we think he's guilty. We think the state proved every element beyond a reasonable doubt. And they're about to go back into the courtroom to announce their verdicts. And just as they're about to enter the courtroom, they go, wait. They stop and they say to that one guy who had said not guilty 5 hours earlier, they said, you know, when we did the straw poll, you were the only one who said not guilty. Did you really think he was not guilty 5 hours ago? And the guy said, no, but 11 of you said that you thought he was guilty. And if I had said I thought he was guilty too, we wouldn't have talked about it. You know, we wouldn't have wrestled with it. And that was our job, to wrestle with it. And I thought we needed to say that in order for us to wrestle with it. He looked at me and he said, Marshall, when you talk to people about the death penalty, you make us wrestle with an issue that we just as soon not talk about. It must be pretty hard for you, but I sure hope you keep doing it as long as you can, because it's really, really, really important. And he gave me a huge hug. And he said to me, at that moment, when they asked that juror, did you really think he was not guilty? He said to me, that should have been me, Marshall, and it wasn't me. And I was more embarrassed and ashamed than I'd ever been in my life. And he gave me that hug. And at that moment, I was more embarrassed and ashamed than I'd ever been in my life. Because what had I done to Andrew on that first day before I even met him? I had dehumanized him. I had made him an other. I had said, ooh, this is gross. And I realized at that moment how easy it is to do. And that's what prosecutors try to do to our clients all the time. And it's what society does to our clients all the time. And so I'm here to tell you, we got to avoid it. It's hard to avoid, but we got to avoid it. And I thank you for letting me share that story with you. Thank you, Abe. The work that you do is so important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, you know, it's always dangerous when you give a lawyer a microphone. But we're going to do that again. One of the things that we have been wrestling with in our movement is this consistent othering and belittling of people, and consistently in this country in the past year, especially, we have been doing that to veterans of the United States military, people who served our country and then end up facing execution. And what they did for our country meant nothing in terms of their eligibility for mercy. So the only person here that's speaking tonight who doesn't know Magdaleno, but now he does a little bit, is our Cody, who's the director of the Center for Veteran Advocacy. And I've gotten to know her over the years because we worked together a little bit in New Jersey on the New Jersey Abolition campaign. Come on up, Art. But more recently, you know, we've been having this spree of executions of veterans, and Art has been willing to come and tell us what are the issues for veterans and how we raise them and what do we need to be concerned about. So please welcome Cody.
Thanks very much. As Dave mentioned, my name is Cody. I've been involved in activism, or involved in the death penalty movement, either as an activist or as a lawyer for about 40 years. As Dave mentioned, I never got a chance to meet one. I wish I had. Somewhat similar to Marshall, my first experience with the death penalty came in my 20s when I was in California, and was the execution of Robert Alton Harris. And it was California's first execution. And I think like him, I wanted to make my statement that I was opposed to this. Don't kill in my name. So I went to that. Shortly thereafter, like Marshall, I went to law school and fought a little harder, or in a different way. And I think also the religious upbringing certainly counts. 15 years of Catholic social teaching were not completely wasted. But in addition to my work in the civilian sector, the military civilian sector, in opposition to the death penalty, I'm also a 30-year military veteran. And you can do that as a reservist because you have 1 foot in the civilian camp and 1 foot in the military camp. And so I was able to kind of dual track that. And my last combat tour was in Afghanistan in 2012. And after I got back from Afghanistan, I had been doing a lot of mitigation work down south, but my military experience, together with what I saw as a pure need for military mitigation, allowed me to take these two worlds that I was very familiar with and put them together. And I do this through an organization called the Center for Veterans Criminal Advocacy. And what CVCA does is to work with veterans across the country, literally from Miami to Seattle to San Diego to wherever. If there's a vet behind bars or the vet's been arrested, we try to get involved. Most of the time, it is because, the work is capital, is death penalty. And we'll take cases literally from 2 or 3 days after the person's been arrested. And as you guys may know, only about 7% of the US population is vets. So, and I think Abe kind of cautioned me before I got up here and said, hey, remember, most of the people here are not going to be able to speak all the acronyms and different numbers and all the nuances of military jargon stuff. And that's true. So you have people on a jury, you have a prosecutor, you have defense attorneys who really don't know what the defendant has been through. And a big part of what we do is to acknowledge that a huge reason why vets are in the criminal justice system, or especially why they're on death row, is because what they had been through. They are absolutely a different population. We take kids who are 19, 20, sometimes 18 years old, and we send them off to war. And I'll give you a good example I have of a client in Florida. And this one, he's 17, because you can do that. He's in the Army by the time he's 18. He's in Afghanistan less than 6 months after he's joined the Army. He has never met the people that he's going to be fighting alongside. He gets to Afghanistan on December 19th. By December 26th, he's already killed 2 people and has a combat infantry badge. He's 19. Okay? The brain is still forming. But we put them through this. It's not like, I think, what they have to do, but it's also what they see, the conditions, what they see in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other places changes it. And I think that's really a central point, is that as a society, we know they are not going to go home the same. It does not happen. And the idea of post-traumatic stress, it's not new. We've been calling PTSD soldier's heart, combat fatigue, all sorts of different names over the years, but it's always been there. And what I always find striking, particularly in Florida, where the governor is a vet, is there seems to be a cognitive dissonance between the fact that we know by percentage that when people go over to the combat zones, that a good portion of them, statistically, year after conflict, are not going to come home the same. Okay, and that's really the population that I deal with, that the center deals with. And I think a big part of understanding that is that when a jury or a prosecutor is deciding whether to seek death or not, a big part of what they're supposed to do, particularly the jury, is to look at the client as a whole. not just what the elements of the crime are. And I'm always reminded what Brian Stevenson said. We're not as bad as the worst thing we've ever done. So in many cases, you have vets who, for a while in their lives, they were considered to be the best of the best. They were trained, they did exactly what their country asked them to do. In fact, they volunteered for it when most of their colleagues said, "I'm not doing that." But they went, and they came back different, came back changed. So what jurors are supposed to do is to understand who they are as a whole person. And a lot of that is wrapped up in the fact, a lot of who they are is wrapped up in being effective. Because I think, without getting too technical, if a person is an infantryman, or in the Army, we say he's an 11B, okay, that's not what his job is. That's who he is. Because they take on that culture, that mantra, if you will, and it changes how they think. And sometimes, from what they've seen, particularly those of them who suffer from post-traumatic, it changes how they act, it changes who they are. It might not surprise you that roughly 11% of Iraq and Afghanistan veterans have been arrested. It's an awful lot of people, about 40,000 people. And another overrepresentation, roughly 10% of death row is vets. It's an awful lot of guys. So absolutely overrepresented. And the way I kind of like to think of that, I don't like to think this is the best way, the way I think you can illustrate that is to say that if there was a death row that was just vets, the only people who would be on this death row was vets, it would be the third largest death row in the country. Okay? California, Florida, and what I call Vetlandia. So it's a big problem. And I think part of it is that it's difficult and we really aim at prosecutors first. Because I think when I say aim at prosecutors, I think prosecutors, for better or for worse, have seen a lot of different murders, a lot of different homicides. Jury's probably going to see one. And for them, this is a really bad murder. This is the murder I ever saw. Okay? So what we really try to do is kind of front load this idea of trying to show them who this vet really is. But sometimes I think it's a mosaic. And some of the mosaics, like the mosaic that prosecutors don't represent, are the mosaics, the crime scene, the victim impact statements, the future dangerousness, all the things that are all about the crime. What we try to do is present, hey, this is who he is, and this is what he did for the country. And a lot of times we try to translate all the jargon, the nuance, what it all means, and also make it so the person who's making the decision, it's not just facts and figures, like, oh, he was involved in Operation Enduring Freedom. What does that mean? What you really have to say is he watched two of his buddies decapitated by a rocket propelled grenade that came through their Humvee and killed them both, and then he had to clean out the blood. Is he going to come back the same? And that's a big part of what we do, is trying to translate the military experience into something that a civilian person can know, understand, and hopefully engender their compassion. One of the things I think about a lot, actually, Abe and I kind of worked on this a bit in Florida at the state of veteran executions, is to set forth the idea that just as there are certain categories of people who are excluded from execution, and you guys may be familiar, one of them is people who commit their crimes under the age of 18, and secondarily, people who have intellectual disabilities. Okay? And we exclude them because they are different. They're categorically different than the rest of the population. And I'm by no means saying, well, I'm a hardcore abolitionist from day one. But in particular, not these guys, because what we've asked them to do, knowing that they're not going to come back okay, and knowing that it's going to change them, and they are a certain very small part of the population that are exposed to this kind of environment, we all better. And so one of the things we're trying to push forth to the folks on the block here is the idea that a combat veteran who is suffering from a mental health issue is immune from capital punishment. Because people who are willing to serve their country, who are willing to die for their society, should not be the same people who are executed by it. That's all I have. As we say in the military, subject to your questions, that concludes my briefing.
Thank you, Art. I promise it was just a few more speakers. But this next one is special. And she is special because she is like me, in that she started out very much in favor of the death penalty. And now she's coming here and cooking like a lobster, looking like a lobster because she's all red and it's on her hands. And but please welcome our treasured Cajun to share just a quick update about what's happening in Louisiana. Brandi, Melissa.
Good evening, y'all. I have a brother that was blown up in Iraq in August of 2006, so following Art is not easy for me.
You gotta talk louder into that microphone.
I have a brother that was blown up in Iraq in 2006, so following Art is really not easy. But he did mention something at Louisiana, pro-life, Republican, Catholic governor, supporter of Israel and the Jewish community, so say, but y'all know what they did last year. This year, we had a bill where they're trying to make it easy to execute people on death row in Angola who have intellectual disability claims. Our Attorney General is literally trying to rewrite the whole definition of what an intellectual disability is when it can be determined up until everything is 21, but she wants to make it 18. They conceded to allow when disability advocacy groups decided to oppose it, who most of their members are strongly supportive of executions, conceded to raise the IQ score from 75 to 78. But when Louisiana politics got involved, they removed those amendments. And by political pressure, it passed out of Jude C. But I confronted a few of them on the floor and they were saying no, even though Senator I've told y'all about, who in 2024 got on the Senate floor and said, as a Christian, it was her duty to vote for allowing gas suffocation executions in Louisiana. Yes, we carried out the first one last year. But thankfully, because of stuff I've done that our governor hasn't figured out, wasn't in a Catholic that had it done. There hasn't been another one scheduled, but there are two pending potentially before they leave office in November 2027. But we also have a statewide recall going. So if they do not, the recall isn't successful, which I hope it is, even as a pro-life Catholic, pro-life conservative Republican, I've never voted for that governor. I've never voted for him for anything, and I wouldn't vote for him to collect garbage. But I will say, as far as everything else that's been said today, there are some people in this room who I know how y'all feel about a particular issue. Human rights begin right here. And to some people, the A word is also the death penalty for an unborn child. And y'all know my background. If you don't, we can talk later. But thank you. And if y'all have any questions, you know where to find me.
Thank you so much, Brandi. Magdaleno, I think would have loved this tonight, hearing these calls to remember people, to hearing calls to know and understand this issue a little bit better so there can be better advocates. and knowing that we are getting to know people a little bit differently in some ways. Our next speaker is Kathy Harris. She serves on the board of directors of the Journey of Hope from Violence to Healing. She's probably most well known in this community for being the better half of Bill Pelkey. And she also has been retired now from the big power company in Alaska and traveling all over the world, and has been just an inspiration to all of us in how she's living her life. Welcome, Kathy.
You know, I actually met Magdaleno before I ever met Bill. The first time I recall meeting him was probably about 1989, 1990. I was living in Texas, and he was at a party that my friend Jude Filler was throwing at her house. And Jude Filler was the state death penalty abolition coordinator for in amnesty jargon, the SDPAC for the state of Texas. And he was at that time the Southern Regional Director. And he was there visiting and supporting her in her unenviable job of trying to convince Texans to work against the death penalty. So she had eventually convinced me to do that. And we were sitting out one night in front of the governor's mansion for an execution vigil, and she said, you know, if you want to make the death penalty personal, you should become a pen pal to a man on death row. So I agreed to have her give me a couple of names, and next thing I know, I'm writing to a guy on death row, and then she convinces me to go with her to visit my pen pal on death row. I actually visited him a couple times before I decided to move to Alaska. My family had moved and settled in Alaska. My dad had retired from the military. I was spending all my vacations going up there to see them, so I thought I would just move to Alaska. By then, all my best friends were part of my amnesty group, so I knew as soon as I got to Anchorage, I would find the amnesty group there because I would find immediately a group of like-minded friends. But I also assumed that I was done doing death penalty work because Alaska doesn't have a death penalty. They haven't had it since before statehood. They abolished it in 1957 and became a state in 1959. However, I moved to Alaska, joined the amnesty group, and about a year after I had joined the group, we had legislation introduced in the state to bring the death penalty to Alaska. That was back when all the congressmen, it was fashionable to be tough on crime by having a death penalty. So we had death penalty legislation on the table, and I showed up at a legislative hearing to testify against the bill and discovered most of the people who had bothered to show up to testify were also testifying against it. So we gathered in the hallway and said, you know, if we don't get organized, we're going to have a death penalty here in Alaska. So a month later, we had an organizing meeting, and I'm the founding board member of Alaskans Against the Death Penalty. And our first outside speakers that we brought up to help us with our education campaign to let people know what the death penalty was really all about was Magdaleno and Marietta Yeager. Interestingly enough, we brought them up in January. You have to really be dedicated to come to Alaska in January. We brought them up in January, first to Anchorage, and then we sent them to Juneau, where the legislators were. And they got weather then. They ended up staying 5 days in Juneau when they were only planning to stay a day.
Oh, gosh.
But bless their hearts, they also got to talk to a lot of legislators because they had a lot of extra time. And we still don't have a death penalty in Alaska.
Yeah.
The next time I remember seeing Magdaleno, well, as part of our campaign to keep the death penalty out of Alaska, two of my fellow Alaskans Against the Death Penalty were Rachel King, some of you probably know her, and Barb Hood, and they started, they organized a photo essay type of booklet where they would take pictures of Alaskans and then have them write a paragraph about why they were opposed to the death penalty. And they made a booklet called Don't Kill for Me. And we made copies of that booklet with the help of SIF grant from Amnesty International and gave them to all 60 legislators. We only have 60 legislators in Alaska, so we made copies for all of them. And we had come to an Amnesty Annual General Meeting in 1996. It happened to be that year in DC that National Coalition had their conference on one weekend and the Annual General Meeting was the following weekend. So several of us came from Alaska to come to both meetings. And at that time, they met the executive director of Murder Victim Families for Reconciliation and were asked to do a similar booklet for the murder victim families. So Barb and Rachel went to the Journey in Virginia in 1996 to start gathering the statements of murder victim family members who were opposed to the death penalty. When Barb heard that there was going to be a Journey of Hope in Texas in 1998, she approached me because she knew I was from Texas, said, we have to go. I need to get some more pictures and some more statements. We should go together. I was still corresponding with my pen pal on death row in Texas, so I thought it was a good opportunity to go visit him also. So we had booked our tickets to go, and a week before we were supposed to leave, her back went out, and her doctor said, you cannot travel. So she hands me her expensive camera and says, go take some pictures. That was when I met Bill Pelkey. He was on the Journey, and she still claims that if she'd been along, I probably wouldn't have hung out with her as much as I did during that journey. But by the end of that journey, I was the volunteer treasurer and on the board of the Journey. So, and Magdaleno was at that. As he tended to do with the Journeys, he would show up at the last rally, usually at the Capitol. And so he was at the Capitol in Texas in 1998 and was inspiring all of us. It was always wonderful. He came to many Journeys after that I was a part of. And he would show up at the last rally, which when everybody's tired and been traveling along the road, and he would kind of rally the troops with his humor and his wonderful speaking ability. So I always look forward as part of a Journey to seeing Magdaleno at the end. And yes, I got to spend time hearing him and Sister Helen play off of each other, which was always extremely entertaining. So from Bill, after I met Bill, I learned from him that Magdaleno was instrumental in getting him involved in the abolition work. He, in his role as a Southern Regional Director, thank you. In his role as the Southern Regional Director, he had approached Bill to come. First of all, there was an annual general meeting in Atlanta, and he invited him to come join the march at the end, to the Capitol at the end there, and invited him to the same 1990, what was it, Lighting the Torch of Conscience march from Stark to Atlanta. And Bill would talk about, he didn't know anything about what he was getting involved in, but Magdaleno had invited him. He drove his van to Stark, shows up at the registration table and says to the lady behind the desk, I'm Bill Pelkey, I'm here to register. The lady jumps up and gives him a big hug, says, I know who you are. I'm Sister Helen. Oh. So that was when he got his introduction to Sister Helen, and he said he got his education about the abolition movement, which he knew nothing about, on that march from Stark to Atlanta. And he was thrilled that he got the opportunity to speak behind the podium at the Ebenezer Baptist Church, because he was a Baptist, so he was very excited about that. So he had a huge influence on Bill getting involved in this movement. And the last Journey I got to see Magdaleno on was in 2024. We did the Georgia Journey. And he did the same thing. He showed up at the Capitol. We had a rally there, and he was the one who emceed it and, you know, brought his unique sense of humor and his great speaking ability. That was the second to last time I saw him, because I was on my way home in early May from a board meeting in Ohio. The Journey had a board meeting, and I happened to have already booked a layover, an overnight layover in Seattle, but I was scheduled to leave very early in the morning. So I asked Alaska Airlines when I got to Seattle if I could change my flight and leave later in the day. And they agreed to change my flight for no charge, and I was able to go visit the hospital and see Magdaleno one more time. And he was still in good spirits, and he was still trying to lift up everybody else in the room, saying, "We will win." And it was such a gift that I got to see him and meet his family at that time. So I appreciated that. And so I wanted to share, Magdaleno loved the Journey, and in his book that he wrote, Looking for My Wings, and I look at that now and think he's found them, he wrote a poem called Journey of Hope. So I want to read this poem for you. It's a journey for many. It's a story of hope. It's the history of strong individuals, of a people speaking in more than one tongue. It's their song of pain over pain, loss over loss, tears becoming rivers, rivers running off to the sea, washing away revenge. It's a journey of hope, of people reaching out with their stories, with their arms, with their hearts, telling of their memories, letting the inside come to the outside, bringing us closer than close can be. It's a journey of hope, turning our pain into promise, helping us to heal our wounds. Something over scars, smoothing over the scars of yesterday. It's a journey of hope, parts of a rainbow coming back together, showing us where to find a better time, a better world, a safe house, a place where we can free our spirits. This journey pushes against this dark blanket of oppression, opening up the skies, letting the sun shine down on our faces, on our dreams, turning our whispers into loud choruses of freedom, turning our candles into bonfires of justice, turning our actions into a forest of flowers. This is a journey of hope. A time for dreamers, a time for forgiving, a time for understanding, a time for reconciliation, a time for giving and for receiving. This is a journey of the heart, a time to find new friends, to travel uncharted roads, to open up new doors into the future. This is a journey for life and redemption. This is a journey for them as well as for us. This is a journey of hope. He wrote this in 1998 and dedicated it to Bill Pelkey and murder victim families for reconciliation. Magdaleno Presente.
Thank you, Kathy, that was beautiful. We have a little bit more poetry for you. But first, a letter from one of Magdaleno's sisters. This is from it says Princess Cistali Montpellier. Right? Am I saying that right?
Princess Montpellier.
Got it. So we have this. My beloved little brother Len, I stand in awe of your amazing life and the 40-plus years you auspiciously pursued the abolition of the death penalty. Shortly after you went home to heaven on May 7th, Senator Dick Durbin introduced Senate Bill, I think it's 54608, or Senate 4608 bill, the Federal Prohibition of the Death Penalty Act, on May 20th, 2026. I shall work tirelessly for the bill to read, the Magdaleno Rose-Avila Federal Prohibition of the Death Penalty Act. You have earned it, and justice demands no less. And I humbly and heartfully say to the Senate, I still believe in justice. I still believe in fairness. Please do not destroy what is left of my rose-colored glasses. And that is from Princess
Montpellier.
Montpellier. I'll say that right. And she's been texting me back and forth to just appreciate all that we have been doing to lift up Magdaleno and wants to do whatever she can to lift up and keep his legacy. So we have another death we want to just note. Chuck Culhane. Some of you may remember Chuck Culhane. He's been here a number of times. Chuck is, as I mentioned earlier at the beginning, we're here because on June 29, 1972, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down all the death penalty laws, which took almost 700 people off death row. Chuck was one of those people, and he was able to get out and hold himself up, and he became a pillar in the community in Buffalo, in the activist community. And we received a very generous sponsorship from somebody who wanted to make sure he was remembered, and who told us that Chuck, when he couldn't come to DC to be part of the Fast Vigil, fasted on his own in Buffalo and held vigil outside the courthouse many times while there were executions happening. So here to remember Chuck just a little bit more and to share some of his poetry is Reverend Gary Wood.
Chuck spent 33 months on death row until he was finally let out. He spent another 20 years in prison after that. But when he got educated while he was in there, and he found out that he really liked poetry. And so just to keep it brief, I'm going to read one poem that he wrote. And since tonight has a Jewish kind of flavor to it,
It is.
the first day of Hanukkah. You should also know that he got his master's in criminal justice and literature, and he taught poetry at the University of Buffalo. This man led a wonderful life. He was always, when I first met him, I said, this is a sage, this is a wise man who has learned a lot of lessons in life, and he was very open-hearted. I'm just going to read one of his many poems, but this is called The First Day at Hanukkah. Old Doc, my neighbor in his dark, wrinkled prison clothes, in the dim, clear light of evening, put out his cell light, put on an electric blue yarmulke over his wild shock of wild hair. Inseparable from the weighty, congested traffic of bodies, each with its own language, mumbling along the edges of the concrete confusion, bracketed by the cries of steel and silent stories, moving through the daunting time, sober, somber, calm guilt and expiation emblazoned along the neon walls, as clear as unseen galaxies and uncertain amidst the bustle and the boredom of maximum security life. He lit 3 candles on the bars and sat on the end of his bed with his prayer book. He prayed in the small light. In his 69th year, neither murderer nor holy man, just bit of bones and spirit, remembering the songs beyond the ruins. Great artist. Thank you, Chuck, for being a part of my life, brief as it was, and touching many other lives. Thank you.
You're just in time. You're welcome. Now we get to hear from Magdaleno's family through his beautiful daughter, Aviva.
Hi, everyone. I am not as practiced of a speaker, so I do apologize. I will be reading most of this. With that being said, I am deeply meaningful to stand with you at Starvin For Justice, a place my father loved so dearly. For decades, he returned to the steps of the United States Supreme Court because he believed in the power of the ordinary people doing extraordinary things. He believed that when enough people are willing to sacrifice a little of themselves for someone else, justice could move forward. That is what gathering has always represented. Every moment that has ever changed history has required people to give up something: their comfort, their certainty, their careers, their freedom, their time. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. sacrificed countless evenings at home with his children so he could build a more just future for all of ours. The leaders of the United Farm Workers Movement endured exhausting marches, boycotts, fasts, and years away from their families because they believed in justice, demanded personal sacrifice. So many of these leaders, whose names fill our history books, carried the heavy burden of choosing between being present with those that they loved and being present where justice called. My father understood that burden. He spent his life serving others: farm workers, immigrants, refugees, families of murder victims, people on death row, people who had been exonerated, people whose society had forgotten. He crossed borders, he organized marches, challenged governments, and stood beside people during their darkest moments of their life. His life demanded sacrifice. But tonight I wanted to tell you something extraordinary. As a little girl, I never felt that it came second to the movement. Instead, he invited me into it. Some of my happiest childhood memories are not of being left behind while my dad changed the world. They are changing the world by his side. I remember traveling with him across countries and across communities. I remember sitting in meetings where I could probably understand very little, but that I felt I belonged. I remember long car rides filled with stories, laughter, poetry, and conversations that made the whole world a little bigger than it had been the day before. Mostly, I remember playing with him. To many people here, he was Magdaleno Rose-Avila, the organizer, the advocate, the storyteller, the abolitionist. To me, he was simply my papa. The man who made me laugh until my stomach hurt. The man who could make every airport, every road trip, every new city feel like an adventure. The man who somehow found time to help build movements without ever making me feel that I wasn't the center of his universe. Looking back, I realized that wasn't an accident. It was one of the greatest lessons he has ever taught me. My father didn't believe that changing the world meant sacrificing your family. He believed your family should become a part of changing the world. He didn't separate his life from his values. He wove us into them. While I thought we were simply taking another trip together, he was teaching me curiosity. This is where I do want to share a couple of stories that I remember, just to give some light to this. Growing up in El Salvador, when I was about 12 and 13, my father became involved with Homies Unidos, those helping get gang members out of gangs. Oftentimes, many of these children don't have options in their children when they're joined and forced to join 13, 14 years of age. And this was the two dangerous gangs that came out of LA with the expatriated Salvadorans, Mara Salvatrucha and Valeria Spiritual. And most of my after-school activities were hanging out with these gang members when I was 12 and 13. Little did I know these were dangerous individuals. They were my big brothers. They would take care of me, they would play with me, and the best memories I had as a kid, actually, in El Salvador, was with these gang members. One of these memories, my father's taking a nap after work, and we're playing in the backyard. And he gets woken up in the middle of his nap with screaming and yelling happening. And so, needless to say, my father busts out of the room wondering what's happening. And he comes across me and the gang members playing Monopoly. And the gang members are incredibly upset. They're screaming at her, ladrona, nos estás engañando, you're robbing us, you're cheating us. Needless to say, this is when my father learned I was a capitalist. I was skimming off the top, as any good, respected bank does when you're doing transactions, except I wasn't probably disclosing these transactions. It's one of my favorite memories. It taught me how regular, ordinary people, or people that are often marginalized by society, are some of the best people that you have in your life. Another story of the gang members, because I absolutely love them. They were my big brothers. We were leaving the school together. They picked me up. And we were driving home, and my father always had these vans, as most of you know. I don't know if you know, but they're often falling apart. You're holding the door as you're driving down the road. With that, he ends up rear-ending the person in front of us. And as a part of the fact that the homies always really respected me, I always had the front seat. So it was my father and myself in the front seat. Couldn't see everyone in the back. With that, the gentleman was very upset, very angry, yelling, screaming, you need to pay me, the insurance claim, you've done a travesty to me. And little bit by little bit, the door opens, and one by one, the gang members get out, just simply looking at the situation that's happening. And slowly but surely, you start to see the demeanor of the gentleman completely morph. So while sometimes those that have perceptions about you are bad, oftentimes they can have good references. With that, I do want to say that while hold on, I'm further than I thought. Tonight, as we honor his memories, I can almost picture where my father would have already been. He would have already met half the people here. He would know all your life stories. He would reference you in his speeches. He would connect you with people that you didn't yet know. He would enchant you with his stories, and he would get you excited about the cause. While I don't necessarily inherited all of those traits, I do like to think that I have inherited the values and the dedication to fighting for what's right. He believed that the conversation could change a mind, every story is softened a heart, every person could become something bigger than themselves. That is why Starvin for Justice meant so much to him. So somehow, after witnessing so much pain and injustice in the world, he never became cynical. He never lost his joy. He never lost his laughter. He never stopped believing that people could change or that love is stronger than fear. He also never became cynical once he started to raise a strong, independent young female. What I mean by that is often he would take me on the road and I would see a lot of speakers like I do at these events. I saw Dolores Huerta, I saw Sister Helen Prejean, I saw Susan Sarandon speak for Dead Men Walking when she won the award. And I had this very serious face on me one day we were driving home after one of these speeches, and he's like, honey, what's wrong? And I'm like, I'm really trying to figure something out that I really need your help with understanding. He's like, honey, sure, of course, what's wrong? I'm like, why is it that women are just simply smarter than men? And then he's like, I don't know how to say it. I was like, look at Mom, you know, look at Dolores Huerta, look at all these fascinating women you have surrounding yourself. And he goes, well, you know what, honey, I guess you're right. Women are smarter than men. And that's the kind of father he was. He always respected me. He always valued what I said. He always used opportunities to teach me. And I always used opportunities to teach him. And the last thing I'll say before I close, is on one of these many trips, he had me on stage with him while he was speaking, and I must have been 5 years old at the time. And he told me to stay in my place the entire time. And if anyone has children, you know that's an impossible task to do. So needless to say, about halfway through his speech, he starts to feel my hand on his butt, and I just keep pushing. And he's like, honey, please, sit down. In the middle of the speech, I keep going incessantly. Needless to say, he had to wrap up his speech a little bit faster. I wouldn't stop. And so afterwards, he's very frustrated, and he's like, honey, what was that about? Why did you keep interrupting me in speech? I'm like, Papa, no one was going to tell you, but you were taking way too long. So with that, I want to say and leave you all with a little something for my dad. We are donating $500 on behalf of his name to the cause. It is something small. Hopefully we can do more. But it's a small way that his memory lives on and us together forever. So thank you.
Thank you, Aviva. That was wonderful, and now we know how he learned to speak. Charles, did you really want to say a few words?
Just a few.
There it is. Please welcome the Minister of Justice, Charles Keith.
Hi, my name's Charles Keith. I'm from Canton, Ohio. You know, when I first started my fight, I was all alone. I fought the death penalty myself. There was no people. I'm in the state of Ohio. I didn't know about any organizations. I didn't know about anything. And I was a very angry man that I had to take on the state of Ohio by myself. Very angry. And then I meet Abe Bonowitz. And, you know, I introduced him to my mom. She says, well, his name's Abraham. His name's in the Bible. He can't be that bad. And I started traveling with Abe. Again, still angry because there were so many things that I did not know. And he kept telling me all his stories. Leno this, Leno that, Chuck Culhane, Bill Pelkey. You know, Leno, Chuck Culhane, Bill Pelkey. You got to understand, we're 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. We're headed somewhere to an execution. We got to keep each other awake. And I'm hearing these stories. I'd never met this man. But my first case, well, I'm going to take you back to where Donald Trump was executing his federal executions. I'd never witnessed anything like that. I had just fought so hard to help my brother that I would not have to witness anything like that. And when I went there and I saw what happened, not just once, not just twice, not 3, 4, 5, I mean, it was unbelievable for my first experience. And I was like, what the heck's going on? This is what I fought to stay away from. Again, I'm angry. And I keep hearing stories about Bill Pelkey. I keep hearing stories about Magdaleno. I keep hearing stories about Chuck Culhane. And I started to soften up. And And I kept wondering, these people don't know anything about my fight, but nor did I know anything about the movement. I didn't even know there was a movement. And I kept listening to Abe telling me, and I said, this guy's softening me up. Seriously. And when I got to Texas for the Melissa Lucio case, I got a chance to meet Leno. I know so much about him, so many stories, and I was like, wow, and I watched him. I didn't, I just had to watch him in awe because I heard so many stories about him. I watched how the people came to him. I watched how he commanded respect. I watched everything that he did. He spoke in English, he spoke in Spanish. I mean, it was just unbelievable that what he meant to all those people. And here I am down here too. So, I learned, I watched, how do you handle a movement? I knew how to fight. I knew how to handle the fighting, but I didn't know the movement of helping others. I didn't know that piece. Giving of what you learned, your pain, your knowledge, whatever you have, you bring that to the movement. And, listening to Abe and those stories, and I finally got to meet Chuck Culhane. Abe's right. He softened me up too.
I got a chance to meet Leno. He softened me up too. And my biggest regret, I never got a chance to meet Bill Pelkey. But every time I come back here to these things, I always go into that room and you can see that little picturesque thing of him. I have to give him my respect for that. I mean, it's deserved. Because, you know, like I said, I started out in this fight all by myself, and to hear these stories, and I said to myself, wow, you know, because Abe's not a tough guy. But where did he go to learn the things that he learned? And I watched the product of Bill Pelkey, Chuck Culhane, and Magdaleno formulate this guy. And he stands in front of you guys, and, you know, he can just carry on, he can go on and on and on and on. When you look at who put him together, who made that diamond, who showed him leadership, without having to go through all the pain. There's Abe over there. And this is the guy I had to follow. So, you know, I had to look and see who he learned from. And I learned to respect all those men. And I just had to tell you that in a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. That was beautiful. All right, will you close us out?
Hey,
And
I'd like to say a couple of words.
yes, of course.
You bring that as close as you can, and I'll meet you there. All the way, wonderful. Hi, my name's Ron Kaz. I first met Magdaleno back in the 80s through Amnesty. Leno was one of the folks who helped change Amnesty from a group who said it was against the death penalty to a group that worked against the death penalty. He served as the Southern Regional Director, and my local group is in the South. I've attended dozens of amnesty events with Leno, dozens of fast and vigils with Leno. And there's one event that I just want to share with you folks. We were at an event, I think it was a fast and vigil, but as I say, there were so many, it may have been a different event. And we were doing introductions. And I introduced myself. And we went around the circle and came to Leno. And Leno said, jokingly, I'm the other Ron Kaz. And I know it was said in jest, but I've never been prouder. And I'm still proud that Leno was willing to associate his name with Ron.
Thank you, Ron. That was beautiful. I'm grateful for you reminding me that you're asked to speak. And I know there's others that want to speak. Art, come on up. But we have several opportunities here to share with Magdalene's wife and daughter and family. And before I ask Art to finish, I'll show just a couple of things. We have on the table, if you didn't get one yet, a button with Magdalene's picture, just like this one. And I have up here, or actually they're in the box right behind that thing over there, a bunch of Sharpies in various colors. And I wanted to invite everybody to come up, or tomorrow if you're still going to be around, and write a message to Magdaleno or his family on this banner. So that is an opportunity for each of us. Even if you didn't know Magdaleno, now you know a little bit about him. And there's one last thing I want to share about him. Magdaleno always, almost always, would say something to the effect in his rallies as he led us, that what's important in life are not the promises that you make. What's important are the promises that you keep. And I want to invite each of us tonight to think about the life that he has lived, the life that Bill Pelkey has lived, the life that Chuck Culhane has lived, and any other people that you emulate and that you see as a mentor for yourself. And make a promise to be like them and to lift up what they have shown us. What matters more than the promises that you make are the promises that you keep. Those are the words of Magdaleno. Tonight, just to finish out with a little bit of logistics, we don't have to leave this building. We're here all night. We have the building overnight and all day tomorrow until midnight, at which time we'll be breaking our fast. Many people here are fasting. Who's fasting? Okay. Everybody is welcome. We'll have a closing circle somewhere around 11:30. We'll have a rally tomorrow at 6 o'clock. That's going to be outside because you can't have a rally in a place like this. So we have the rally at 6 o'clock. We have the closing circle at 11:30. At 11 a.m., Carolyn is going to come back and we'll gather and we'll toll the bell for Magdaleno and we'll sprinkle some ashes. So if you want to be a part of that, that's at 11 a.m. And if there's anybody that's not in the room right now who you think would want to be a part of that, please tell them so that they can do that. So we're grateful for that opportunity. And Scott, am I leaving anything out?
We taking him up to the plaza? Sprinkle the ashes?
We'll figure that part out.
Oh,
Okay. But yes, we're going to make sure that Magdaleno is presented here at the United States Supreme Court. And as he has been outside, thank you for everybody for putting up this banner today and having that. So I'm just grateful for everybody that has spoken and everybody that is giving us the space to close this out. You can still share your thoughts. And that is, if you don't get the emails that I've been sending out about Magdaleno, totally separate from the death penalty action stuff, we've been inviting people to fill out a form online to help us gather the stories about Magdaleno. So, and there'll be a book, and maybe there'll be a movie, who knows? But if you want to be in and part of his legacy, scan this, fill out the form, and share your stories. I think that's it. I'm so grateful to each and every one of you who has come tonight. I'm so grateful for Carolyn Aviva for traveling to be with us today. They made a special trip. They hadn't planned to do this memorial here. And when I said, hey, the Fast and Vigil is happening and we're going to do a memorial, please come if you can. And they did. And we'll hear a little bit from Carolyn in the morning. And also just again, thank you so much for inviting me into your lives and giving me the opportunity to be the hub of all of Magdaleno's communities.
It's true. Everybody knows you.
I've met so many people. If anybody wants to donate some frequent flyer miles, I'll go out to Seattle, I'll go out to Denver, to the other memorials who are happening. But seriously, the gift that I received when Beverly called and said, you have to call Kimbo, Magdaleno's son, and I did, and he was in the hospital with Magdaleno, and Magdaleno at that time didn't think it was a Friday evening, he didn't think he was going to make it to Tuesday. And he ended up surviving a few more weeks so that lots of people could come and be a part of his life and could send him messages, and I'm grateful for all of you who did that too. And there's a video that I'll share again on my Facebook that has many of those reactions in it. In any case, I've said too much, but it's been such an honor and a pleasure to be in the space of gathering people around Magdaleno and around you. And thank you for that opportunity. With that, I'd like to.
So friends, one memory that Abe did mention, which is a very special one for him and his family, was that Leno presided over the wedding of Abe and Beth outside the Supreme Court at midnight on July 2nd. So tomorrow's their wedding anniversary. And I don't know if you would remember that, how many people were here in the room who were at the wedding? That Abe and Beth. And
It's our
Magdaleno
20th anniversary.
20th anniversary. Well, thanks be to God. So, we carry Magdaleno in our hearts in so many ways. And this song, I would ask you to all rise. And, this is a song we all know and we can all sing together. Because we carry the light of love, hope, peace, justice everywhere we go, including at this Supreme Court. And I know Magdaleno would want us to know that, we are continuing his witness. And so when we sing this song, we can know that he's in our hearts and he's with us in a very special way on this night and in our witness here these days. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This is the light of love. We're gonna let it shine. This is the light of love. We're gonna let it shine. This is the light of love. And we're gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine. Let it shine all around the Supreme Court. We're gonna let it shine all around the Supreme Court. We're gonna let it shine all around the Supreme Court. We're gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it all around the Capitol. We're gonna let it shine all around the Capitol. We're gonna let it shine all around the Capitol. We're gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This is the light of peace. We're gonna let it shine. This is the light of peace. We're gonna let it shine. This is the light of peace. We're gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Where there is violence, we're gonna let it shine. Where there is violence, we're gonna let it shine. Where there is violence, we're gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Hide it under a bushel. No, we're gonna let it shine. Hide it under a bushel. No, we're gonna let it shine. Hide it under a bushel. No, we're gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. 'Cause this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, we're gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, we're gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Magdaleno, presente.